I'm Shoaib Alli from Sportsnet 590 The Fan in Toronto, and you're listening to Red, White, and Blue Jays.
Swing and a drive.
Welcome to Red, White, and Blue Jays, the podcast home of Blue Jays Fans UK, a group connecting Blue Jays fans around the UK and beyond, and telling their story. And now, here's the host of Red, White, and Blue Jays, Steve Hunter.
Hi guys, welcome to another episode of Red, White and Blue Jays. Great to catch up with you again. And I'm very excited this afternoon that I have managed to track down Shoaib Alli from Sportsnet 590 The Fan. So how are you? Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Steve. It's a lot of fun.
Great. Is this your first dip into anything into the UK? I don't know whether you've got any connections out this way at all.
I do. I guess from a media perspective, definitely. But I do have some family that live in Liverpool, so that's my only connection to the UK.
Okay.
I would say. Yeah.
Have you ever been here at all?
I have not. No, I think I think I've always wanted to come. I've never been to. I actually only been to Europe. I think maybe once when I was in high school. We went on a trip to Paris, and that's about it.
Nice, very nice. Well, Liverpool's a great city, great football team.
Yes,
so yeah. So and of course doing very well this season in particular. Do you follow soccer? I guess you guys call it, but do you follow it at all?
I admit, so I guess in my job at the Fan, we do kind of carry on and follow basically as many sports as humanly possible, and that includes like golf and tennis and F1 and so on and so forth. Even when the pandemic started, it was a lot of following KBO for the beginning of the pandemic, right?
Sure.
But the Bundesliga, I think, came back pretty early on. But I admit, no, for football/soccer, I follow people who have the same last name as me. So I think the closest I've ever gotten is Dele Alli, who I'm told is used to play for the Spurs and is no longer with them. So that's as close as I'll come.
Okay, no, that's all right. Well, at least you got some knowledge there. I remember when I was chatting with Jeff Barker, because he loves his soccer and a lot of really, really good knowledge. And I was like, oh gosh, I hope I don't make a fool of myself. But
I actually once joined a Premier League fantasy soccer, fantasy football league with Blair and with Barker. And Barker, I think, actually came in pretty high, close to the top. And Blair's old producer, his name is Travis. Travis is like he's one of the most knowledgeable people I've ever met here about soccer/football. And so that was fun. But as you might imagine, Steve, I did not come in very highly in that league.
There's always a place to learn.
Yes.
Even Kevin Barker. So I actually live in a place called Bournemouth, which is on the south coast. And Bournemouth have just been promoted back up into the Premier League. And so, Kevin Barker was exposed to a little bit of Bournemouth knowledge when he came on, which, of course, went down like a lead balloon, but he did brilliantly. Yeah, no, it was good fun chatting with him. So, just for the benefit of guys listening in, just give us a little bit of a backdrop to you then in terms of how you came to be doing what you're doing. What's your sort of storyline, if you like, into media and sports and all that sort of stuff? Just give us a bit of a flavor.
So let's see. I've been working at Sportsnet for the last 6.5 years or so, and I think I was an intern at the Fan when Edwin Encarnacion walked off the Orioles in the wild card game. And I remember we were there. That was my first night, I think, sitting in the Sportsnet newsroom. And of course that was well before the pandemic. So it was packed full of people. And I kind of thought, wow, this is what it's like every night. This is fantastic. But it was fun being there for that pretty high. But actually, before I worked in media, I used to work in corporate security, risk management and internal audit for one of the major Canadian banks. And I worked in there for a number of years after I graduated from university, and I went to university here in the city of Toronto. And I don't know, it was a fun job, but it wasn't super exciting. You know what I mean? So I quit my job, I went back to school, and the first internship I got out of school, I guess my second stint in school, was at Sportsnet. And when you do the internships at Sportsnet, you have a bunch of little buckets you can go into. There's like the digital web team, there is television, you can work on cutting highlights and so on, or you can work in radio. And at the time, not a lot of people wanted to work in radio. So I thought it would, I thought it was something I had been interested in a long time. I've listened to Sportsnet 590, The Fan, or The Fan 590 for years when I was growing up here. So I thought that'd be kind of cool to work for a legacy sports station. And yeah, a couple of years later, I think my first hosting gig was the night the Toronto Maple Leafs made a particularly large trade. They acquired a defenseman, and I just happened to be my first hosting gig, and the bosses liked it. So here I am.
That's it, mate. So did you have any interest in radio broadcasting at all? As you're going up through high school, did you have like a school radio station at all that you dipped into? I mean, what actually got the wheels moving in terms of, I'd actually like to have a go at this?
I think so. When I was in university, I went to the University of Toronto, which is here in downtown Toronto, or at least one of the campuses are, and they have a radio station called CIUT FM. And I was one of the radio hosts for, like, this is when like 2010 or 2009 or something like that. But I was a program called Beyond the Classroom, where you'd interview, I guess, like student leaders and I don't know, people on campus and so on, students, about what's going on, athletes, etc. So that it was kind of like that combined with writing for the Varsity, which is the U of T's new student newspaper. So that kind of that was like always my interest in broadcasting / I guess sports journalism specifically, over any usual journalism. I went to school, and then when I was actually in school, one of my instructors was Shy. So Shy, that's how I met Shy. And so Shy he's like, hey, Show, like if you're interested in sports broadcasting, TV, you might be good on TV, or you might really enjoy radio. So I picked the radio route.
What a story. Because he told me a little bit about the work that he was doing in terms of pulling people through into the industry.
Right.
It's amazing. I had no idea that you were one of his former pupils. So in terms of the sports love, are you leaning towards one particular sport which you think that's my sport, or are you a good sort of general all-round knowledge type of guy?
I would definitely say baseball is number one, but I definitely can't say that I don't like hockey or basketball, or I mean, I feel like it's kind of hard to not like hockey in Canada, and specifically as someone who grew up and was born in in Toronto, I feel like as much as I would like to not cheer for the Leafs, I don't think I can help it at this point in my life. So I think I'm stuck until I die, unfortunately. But same goes for the Raptors, same goes for the Blue Jays, and there's not a lot of built-in fan bases for, I would say, like American football here, or I guess for golf and tennis, you just tend to cheer for Canadians. But generally speaking, working at the Fan, I think, has broadened my interest into other sports. I mentioned F1 before and so on. But I think a lot of the four major North American sports are, I consider myself, decently knowledgeable in all of them. But if I had to pick my favorite, it's probably baseball.
Okay. So were you Toronto born and bred as well, or have you moved into the city?
So I was born in the suburbs, but when I moved down here and this was like in 2008 when I went to university, I moved downtown, and I've lived here ever since. I actually don't live that far from the Rogers Center itself. I could probably walk there in about 10 minutes, which is kind of nice. Because every now and again, like last week, for example, when we get to do the in-game stuff from the stadium, it's not a very far walk. I feel bad for like Blair and Barker, who don't live very close by, or like Ben Wagner. Actually, Ben does live pretty close, I think, but he and I are probably the only ones. Everyone else, including Tom Young, who's our engineer, Tom does not live close by. So I feel bad for them when they have to take the bus at home, but I get to walk, which is nice.
Very nice. I have a good friend, Elizabeth Hart, who works at does your imaging, producing. Yeah, she's great. She helps us. We do a live show where we just review the games once a week, and she's part of that team with us. And she doesn't live too far away. I think over Hyde Parkway, and so again is close to the stadium, which makes life, I'm sure, a lot easier.
It does.
So in terms of, because I think, did I see that you covered a bit of NFL for Sportsnet as well? Is that one of the main sports that you also dip into, or are you just mainly in baseball now?
Yeah, so I think one of the things I do for the Sportsnet digital team for the website is I write some fantasy football articles, like start sits type stuff. So that's kind of like the fantasy / gambling stuff, as you know, is constantly growing. And I think for the NFL in particular drives a lot of viewers and engagement towards that. So they've never really had a dedicated, I guess, weekly article during the NFL season. So they asked me to do that last year, and I'll probably be doing it again this year. One of the things I do in addition to baseball is me and a pal of mine, Andy McNamara, we co-host the Fantasy Show, which is a weekly 2-hour show about any fantasy sport. But of course, as you might imagine, especially in North America, the NFL is pretty popular. So that typically drives most of the stuff. So yeah, I think I guess it'll be August. We'll probably dive back into fantasy football stats, but that's kind of where the bulk of my writing for the .ca team resides.
Yeah, very good. And there is one other area of life that I know that you're interested in, and that would be movies.
Right.
you got a little movie podcast going as well. So what's is that just a personal interest thing?
Oh yeah, that's just a hobby. Yeah, I think when I first started working at the Fan, and when I was hired, I should say, we used to have these old studios because the building itself is split in two. There's like one side of the building is on this road called Mount Pleasant, and the other side of the building is on the main street on Bloor. And there's a bridge that connects them. And Rogers, I guess, renovated the one half of the building. And so we used to have studios next to like our news affiliates and our music stations on the other side of the building. And when it was being renovated, we could still use the studios, but no one wanted to use them because they were like, I get to go out, through all these red tape stuff to get there kind of thing. So I used to go there at like 3 a.m. just to record my movie podcast, just to talk about, I don't know, silly stuff about movies and so on. I still do it every now and again, but the Jays have been keeping me pretty busy. So I've only gotten back in the studio maybe like once or twice this year, but still it's just a fun side hobby.
Yeah, no, it's good to do that sort of stuff, isn't it? It just takes you out of and again, particularly in terms of baseball, the grind of the day to day.
Oh yeah,
and particularly this season where everything's all very much condensed and very little in terms of days off. And we often think about the players and the staff at the club, but of course, all of you guys, you are also having to do day after day after day after day. I mean, how is that in terms of just balancing life in general when you're involved on a daily basis?
I guess it's not too bad because I generally speaking am a night owl, so I usually go to bed pretty late already, and I've always been like that. So even dating back to when I was in high school, so it's not for me it was an easy adjustment. The person I feel bad for is my wife. She is the kind of person who wakes up at like 7 a.m. and goes to bed at 11 p.m. and so often it's like two ships passing in the night. So I think I get the sense that once the baseball season is over, she'll be pretty happy.
Yeah, no, I think it is a tale of two cities, isn't it? In terms of in season and out of season, they look completely different. And I guess with the guys being out in the West Coast at the moment, that probably suits you quite nicely, doesn't it? In terms of late nights.
Oh yeah. I mean, last night, for example, after the 6-3 opening win, right? We I think I got home at maybe 3 a.m., which sounds late, but I mean, I had a late dinner and then I wound down and got into bed and here I am. This is the first thing I'm doing today. It's great.
That's all right. So what is it now? Is it just gone 1 o'clock in Toronto? So that's not a bad start, is it? And that, of course, you get a little feel for what it's like for us on a normal evening game. So it normally starts around midnight here for an evening game in Toronto. So we go 3 to 3 o'clock in the morning. On a fairly regular basis. Love the day games. Weekends are always things to look forward to. But weekdays it's hard to keep up with all the live stuff, with everything else going on. That's brilliant. Just tell me, what's it been like working alongside the likes of Ben Wagner and Ben Nicholson-Smith? I know you've been doing a little bit of the radio stuff as well. How much is that in terms of enjoyment? That must be great fun.
Oh yeah, Ben is fantastic. Or you asked me about two Bens. Both Bens are fantastic, and I gotten a chance to work with Ben Wagner since he was hired. Because one of the first things I ever did for the Jays broadcast, I think I started working on the Jays broadcast back in 2016 26 at the tail end of 2016 as an intern, and then I more full-time in 2017 as a producer. So producing a lot of games, cutting clips, making sure the broadcast is just going to air okay. So I've gotten to work with Jerry a little bit. I've gotten to work with certainly Mike Wilner a little bit, and now Ben. And Ben is a lot of fun to work with. I know he wants to be traveling a little more, but at the same time, I'm happy I get to sit next to him, because he is, dare I say, as plugged in as any insider you might see. Like, I know we were talking about Shai earlier. Shai is obviously an insider. I would say Blair's an insider as well, because he has connections to the front office and other teams through his many years of covering baseball. But Ben is so plugged in. He can get you any information you want on any prospects or any stadium developments. He, like, the stuff he has told me just sitting next to him off the air when the mics are off is pretty cool. So he's just a fantastic person as well. So Ben is a lot of fun to work with. And then Ben Nicholson Smith and Arden, who I've gotten to work with as well. Arden Zwelling, they both host the At the Letters podcast, and the two of them are some of the nicest guys. Like, they're always so generous with their time, and obviously incredibly knowledgeable as well. Arden, I think, has the what's the right word, like the acerbic wit, I think, and Ben is like the calming presence, which I think works well for them.
I can see that, with having listened to them a lot over the years. I think, in terms of the Sportsnet team, I mean, just an amazing collection of guys and girls, right through into sort of Hazel on the sidewalks of the game, right through to the broadcast crew and stuff. I just hats off to all of you, because it's a brilliant listen to and a brilliant watch, and particularly for people like us who are seldom able to get to a live game, apart from when we can travel over. But most of our experience of watching the Jays is, of course, listening online, and for the radio broadcast. And I said this to Ben Wagner when I had him on. A lot of the games I will listen to late into the night actually would be on the radio, rather than I'll be lying in bed with me headphones in and be listening to the radio broadcast. And so it's really important media to keep going. And I was so pleased to hear when the radio broadcast came back after that sort of shared moment with the TV broadcast, and as well as the guys did on the TV to make it accessible on the radio. It's nice to have a dedicated radio team. So it's great listening into you. How do you enjoy doing the Blue Jays talk? I know obviously Blair and Barker are doing the vast majority of that, but you're dipping into that world. And how much fun is that, just sort of taking fans' calls and sort of having to think on the seat at the edge of your seat in terms of answers and bits and pieces? What's that like?
You never really know what someone's going to say. Like, you know what I mean? Like, sometimes, like, when we screen calls too, they'll say, "Hey, I want to talk about this, this, and this." And then they go on the air, and sometimes they might say something completely different, which is it's always pretty fun. So that's why Tom always has his finger on the delay button, and just in case there's some inadvertent cussing. But I will say, I think the team has so much fun, and like the actual baseball team, and there's so many personalities on it. There's always something happening in the dugout. So I think there's never any shortage of anything to talk about for callers. Like, when the team is bad, obviously, or when they're struggling, maybe is a better way of saying it, there's always something that someone wants to suggest. And when the team is good, there's always, you talk about trade targets, or you talk about, and that's where the knowledge of other teams comes in handy, maybe a little bit. But I mean, look, Blair and Barker do such a great job when they do the bulk of the show. But it is kind of fun dipping your toe into it a little every now and again. I do it with. It's funny. I've now hosted the show with Blake, Ben Nicholson Smith, Ben Ennis, and I think a couple others as well over the course of this season alone. So it's a kind of a fun cast to be doing it with, because we have a lot of talented people here at Sportsnet and elsewhere. So it is definitely fun. I think I'm looking forward to doing it more. We've given Blair and Barker the Angels series off because they have to get up super early the next day. So they let me stick in the studio until 3 a.m.
Lucky old you, but if you you enjoy your late night, so that's okay. So that's not too bad a show. Okay, well, let's have a little bit of chat about the Jays then. When I first asked you whether you'd come on, the scene was slightly downbeat. If we're absolutely honest, they started well. We had a few series wins at the beginning of the season through April. And just through May, they just I don't know. They were just struggling all over the place, particularly obviously with the offense. I think that's the thing that everybody's talking about. What's your take on what's happening, particularly in terms of when we compare it to what was happening at the end of last season, and everybody was coming into 2022 saying, this is one of the best offenses in the league, and just it's not just one or two guys seem to be struggling getting bat on ball. It's right across the whole batting lineup. What do you feel's going on there, or is it just one of those things?
Yeah, I mean, I know Montoya has spoken at length about how he feels it's just everyone struggling at the same time. And I guess there is some degree of truth to that, right? But boy, I mean, to start the year, and this is right through to the Shohei Ohtani game to start the series against the Angels, they have seen so much nasty velo to start the year. More, I dare say, I'm pretty sure more than any team in Major League Baseball in terms of guys who are actually capable of throwing in the high 90s, low 100s. And I mean, look, we saw Jordan Hicks the other day. That guy was topping out at what, on 101, 102. Certainly Miles Michaelis was doing that as well. We've seen a whole bunch of other guys do that too. And maybe it's the high velo combined with maybe less patience at the plate. It certainly feels like, I mean, for Bo Bichette and Vladdy, for example, not taking as many pitches or swinging. I mean, we all know Bo is super aggressive, for example, right? So even when he was called up, he was hacking at the first pitch, no matter what it felt like, and more often than not, it worked out for him. But now that the book is a little more full, let's say, on Bo Bichette and Vladimir Guerrero Jr., maybe they needed to relax a little bit. But the interesting thing is, and Barker talked about this. And I love his insight on these kinds of things because, of course, between he and I and Blair and Shai, he's the only one who actually played in the major leagues. And he talks about how hitting is contagious and how, even getting your first plate appearance, you get on base and it makes you feel a little calmer. You saw that in the second game, I should say, against the St. Louis Cardinals, when Vladdy, I think on his first swing or his second swing of that at bat, he barrels one into left field. And then his next at bat, I think, was a home run. And yesterday, the same thing too, right? You saw Springer immediately hit a home run, and it seemed to relax everyone a little bit at the plate. And it's certainly, you're not going to hit every guy every time you go up for an AB, but I wonder if this, it may not be the offensive explosion we all kind of hope for at the beginning of the season, because there's still a ways to go when you want to catch up to the Yankees. But I mean, they've actually, funnily enough, closed the gap on the Rays. I think after last night's game, they're only 2 games back of the Rays for second place in the East. So look, I think there's a lot of baseball left to be played. It's a 6-month season. We're at the end of May. So I guess that would be end of 2 months, give or take. Right. So I think we're in a good spot now to hope that the Jays turn things around. But hey, if the starting pitching can keep doing what it's doing and the bullpen can at least stay where it has been, because I mean, there have been some blow up games from basically everyone, but that's expected over a long season. I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised about where the Jays are come maybe, let's say, August or September.
Yeah, I think we've just passed the quarter mark in terms of the season length. So, and I think probably what we're all doing is comparing it to our aspirations at the beginning of the season, thinking this is just going to be 100-game season, and that those sort of stats were being kicked around, which probably wasn't very realistic compared, considering that we're in the AL East. But nonetheless, there was a lot of high velocity excitement going around this team, and I think we're now comparing that position with what we've seen, and it's fallen short. I mean, with Vladdy, I think do you think, Phil, yesterday might have been a little bit of a turning point for him? Does it make any difference that he was against Shoei, that he got his homer? Does those sort of things, are they relevant for a baseball player, or is it, do you know what, I just need to get bat and ball, get the ball out of the park? Does that really matter?
I feel like with Vladdy specifically, a lot of these guys, their confidence is so much a part of their game, right? I mean, and that you can probably say it about any professional athlete in any sport. And whenever Vladdy is slumping, it certainly seems like his launch angle certainly becomes parallel to the ground, or very, very close to it. It certainly seems like it, right? Hitting balls right into the dirt, ground balls. And I know people had an issue, I guess, going back a couple of days ago. I guess it was the first game against the St. Louis Cardinals when the pitcher Palante, he walked the first 2 batters with the bases loaded. The Blue Jays went up 3-1, and then Vladdy comes up with the bases loaded, and he immediately, the first pitch, he swings and it's a ground ball, and the inning is over. And I feel like you did see a slower approach from him. He took a couple of balls. He was more patient in the second game against the Cardinals. And then again last night, and like you mentioned, the whole battle with Shohei Ohtani, I'm not even sure. I could be wrong. I feel like it's been a very long time since, probably because not many pitchers are AL MVPs, but
Yeah.
how often do you see an AL MVP runner-up hit a home run off the unanimous AL MVP winner? Probably never. I would imagine, right? So
yeah,
I think you're probably right, Steve. I think there is something to be said for the guy Vladdy gets a home run off for a second straight game is Ohtani. Because again, look, you looked at the rest of the expected pitchers for the Angels series, Lorenzen, Sandoval. I think later tonight is Silseth, right? So those guys aren't slouches by any means, but they're not Shohei Ohtani, right? So if you can take advantage of Ohtani, even if he's not a 100% locked in, that has got to do wonders for your confidence. And I imagine not just for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., but for the rest of the team. I actually now, because we didn't see Teoscar Hernandez in the lineup last night, I do kind of wonder if we see him in the lineup later tonight, or at least later on in this Angels series. Because look, the guy's a back-to-back Silver Slugger. You don't bench a guy like that because of splits against righties and lefties. He's the guy you keep in there at all times. So I would imagine it's just a mental thing for him. But I am he's kind of the next guy now that Bo has kind of positively regressed. Vladimir Guerrero Jr. looks like he's starting to get there as well. Yeah. Hey, Oscar can get back to that form as well. Then I think you're cooking with some gas here, I think.
Well, totally. I think, with Springer also doing well at the top of the order, I think obviously the player that again has caught everybody's attention this season and did last year, but probably not to the degree that he has is Santiago Espinal, who certainly with the bat and defensively is performing probably above the level that we anticipated he would do. And I think, at the beginning of the year, obviously his role with Biggio, was that going to be a sort of platoon situation? And clearly he's just pushed on, and while Cavan's obviously struggled. How do you feel about him being in the number 2 spot? Is that a good thing for him that he's been promoted to that position? Or is it just that's what's happening at the moment and we will see him drop back to a more normal position in the lineup? What difference would that make to a player being pushed forward into that 2 spot?
So Espinal is actually one of the few players I've had a chance to chat with this year. And he is, I got to say, Steve, one of the humblest guys I have of any athlete I've ever interviewed, right? I've been pretty lucky in my career to talk to a bunch of different athletes from the Leafs, from the Raptors, other teams, the Olympic teams, for example. I got to chat with Carlos Delgado, which was a particular highlight of mine as one of my favorite players when I was younger. But Espinal, I think, honestly ranks, if not at the top, very close to the top in terms of how humble he is. So if you ask him, hey, are you going to bat second all year? If they move you down to 6th or 7th or what have you, if it calls for it, will that be an issue? And he has never once said boo, right? Like he is completely fine with that. And so I would imagine that's not going to cause any issues, right? I don't really think the sense I get from just observing some of these players is I don't really get a sense that there's a lot of ego on this team, right? Like I don't really get the sense that, like, if Vladimir Guerrero Jr. comes to you and says, hey, look, coach, I want to bat second, I don't want to bat third, then I think that the difference is negligible enough that you can go on ahead and say, okay, Vladdy, do what you want, bat second instead of third or whatever. Or if Bo says that, you say, okay, you can do that if you want to. But I think with the team struggling and everyone struggling at the same time for about a number of, it feels like the whole season until the last week or so, I think you try what you need to. And I think I dare say Espinal being in the 2 spot kind of reminds me of Semien being that high last season. And it's funny because a lot of people have brought up, hey, maybe this offense needed Semien after all. And like, I don't know if anyone's looked to see what he has been doing with the Texas Rangers
yesterday. Yeah.
Oh boy, it's not pretty. No, it's not good. I dare say he might never recapture what we saw last year, which is unfortunate because I actually really like Semien, right? I think he's a great leader, and I thought he was a great influence on this clubhouse too. It was really cool to see him get the award with Vladdy and Teoscar at the beginning of the season at the home opener when the Rangers were in town. But generally speaking, I think Espinal being in that 2 spot for now, I think does help Vladdy and Bo in 3 and 4. But I wouldn't be shocked if after too long, we see Espinal move back down to maybe 5th, and then you get Chapman. And I mean, the other question really is, and this has only come about in the last couple of games, is how high does Danny Jansen bat now in the order,
sure.
right? Because I think that's something we got to talk about now, because I mean, he's hit now 3 home runs in 2 games, probably an unsustainable pace for home runs. But at the same time, he definitely like, if you came to me yesterday and you said after the ball game and you said Danny Jansen is one of the best catchers in Major League Baseball, I would have a hard time altogether disputing that, because he has been absolutely phenomenal since coming off the injured list. And heck, he almost had 2 home runs yesterday. One of the first booming flyout in the 4th inning would have been a home run in like 18 ballparks. So I think Danny Jansen's presence and batting being hot again, I think will also affect where Espinal goes too.
Yeah. And Matt Chapman, in terms of his offense, is not quite really clicking, but then he wasn't bought for his offense. He was bought for his defense. And while he's had a couple of moments that probably he won't be very proud of, generally his defense has been brilliant. How do you help somebody, because he's going to be in the lineup, isn't he? Is it a case again you just have to keep working, keep looking at the technique and encouraging somebody who's not performing in that area?
I think so too. Yeah, I think the solution for him might just be he's going to have to keep batting in the bottom third of the order until they figure it out. But I will say for Chapman, I think he has maybe the worst luck when it comes to the fly balls, at the very least. Like, certainly he's hit a number on the ground or a couple bloops right into just past second base bag that have gone past there, and he's gotten on base that way. But there have been a number of hits, and even if you want to limit the sample size to the last 2 weeks and not the whole season, because like you said, he was brought here for his defense. We knew when the trade was made that he strikes out a lot, right? We knew that already, and unfortunately the strikeout rate I think has gotten a little worse this year. But at the same time, the booming hits into the gloves of outfielders with their backs against the outfield wall this year, I dare say, have been more than almost anyone else in the team. And now I don't know if that's just maybe it's bad luck with the ballpark configurations. Like, I know there was a particularly egregious example where I think it was a game at Yankee Stadium where Giancarlo Stanton hit a ball, like a 3-run jack into the short porch in right field. And I think it was maybe the very next inning that Chapman hit what looked like a 410-foot bomb into the glove of an outfielder in left field. So there's some luck in that involved as well. And then I also wonder, with someone like Chapman who hits a lot of fly balls, I wonder how much the whole dead baseball thing comes into it a little bit too. I mean, even last night we saw Vladdy probably could have gotten another home run last night. And even for the Angels, right? I mean, Anthony Rendon was this close to hitting another home run. And so was Juan Lagares. I mean, that game could have looked a lot different if Angel Stadium didn't hold those balls in. And that's the case for a lot of teams this year, not just the Blue Jays. So I do kind of wonder if we're at the end of May here. So I kind of wonder if we get into maybe June, July, it becomes a little more humid across North America. Just generally speaking, the roof at Rogers Center is open more frequently. I wonder if we might see that change, although I don't know if you really want to bank on humidity and weather as a reason for someone struggling also.
I mean, because they're talking about when they do the batting practice with the balls from the previous season, that they're seeing it going out consistently. And
Steve, I've sat at Rogers Center a couple times in the radio booth and you get to watch. I got there a couple hours before you watch batting practice from the field level and in the booth, and you'll see guys, and Chapman more than almost anyone else, Bo Bichette too. But what they do on the video board is they have they get rid of all the graphics and they have the music playing. But instead of the graphics on the video board, they have as soon as the ball leaves the bat, you see the exit velo and you see the expected distance for the ball. And I swear there was a period of time over the last couple of weeks where Chapman, using that basket of balls, hit nothing but home runs to dead center field right off the scoreboard. Like, he did it 5 straight balls, and then he'd take a break. Bo would go in there, do the same thing. Chapman would go back in, do the power is clearly there. So I do question how much this whole baseball thing is legitimately affecting someone like him. And maybe when the dome is closed, that doesn't help as well. But
sure,
the power is clearly there. It's not. I don't think he's fallen off on that regard, at least.
Yeah. So what's the answer for the catching position? Because we have a plethora of great candidates. Obviously, since Danny, as you mentioned, coming back off the IL, has performed extraordinarily well. You've got Kirk, who generally It's good bat and ball, perhaps not so good defensively. Zach Collins actually played well when he was called upon. And then we've got Gabriel Marino, who's in the wings doing what he's doing. How did the Jays unpack that one?
I would love to see, much like we saw last year. Remember, we kind of had this conversation to a lesser degree last year, especially when Kirk came up and raked right away. And I think the conversation then, instead of being Zach Collins, it revolved around Reese McGuire and I guess Riley Adams to a lesser degree. And wouldn't we all like Riley Adams back instead of having traded him for Brad Hand last year? I dare I say most Blue Jays fans would like a mulligan on that one. But I think when it comes to this year, I would genuinely like to see some kind of depth move be made. Like, I know we talk so much about a left-handed bat, but at the same time, is it worth trading? I mean, I don't want to see them trade Danny Jansen. I want to see Danny Jansen remain a Blue Jay for as long as humanly possible. So that, I think, for me at least, that's off the table. I think Alejandro Kirk is an interesting one because I think good old Captain Kirk, I love watching him play. I think he has struggled defensively. I think he has improved a lot this year, I will say, year over year. With the pitch framing and the blocking at the plate and throwing guys out at second, he has been more successful this year. So I think, generally speaking, I've liked what I've seen from Kirk this year. Having said that, if Gabriel Moreno is waiting in the wings, and now that Adley Rutschman for the Orioles has been called up, I believe Moreno is at worst the number 3 or 4 overall prospect who has yet to be called up from the minors. I think Kirk might make it difficult for Moreno to be called up this year because, I guess we could see them carry 3 catchers. We've seen that before. But at the same time, I wonder if it might not be worth exploring a trade for Kirk. If you truly believe Moreno is going to be the catcher of the future, even over Danny Jansen, then you might as well see what you can get. Although I will say, I don't think Ross Atkins is going to make a trade just for the sake of making a trade, right? And I think they'll live with having 2 to 3 catchers on the roster for now, because, I mean, what are the holes right now? I guess it would be a left-handed bat, maybe some relief pitching, dare I say, right, to take the burden off of some of these other guys like Simber and Richards and Garcia. So if that's the case, do you really want to give up Kirk for someone who is only going to pitch every couple of days, or someone who, you know what I mean? So I think the lefty bat is, I think, something there, but how many of those are up for sale around Major League Baseball in May, right? You might have to wait until closer to the trade deadline for that.
Yeah. And in terms of Nate Pearson, just talking about pitching and relief pitching, I haven't heard too much about how he's doing in his recovery. Anything that you're aware of that would bring a little bit of hope in terms of his rehabilitation back into the team?
Yeah, Ben Nicholson Smith actually yesterday was telling me that he is down, I think, in Buffalo, throwing some bullpen sessions. So he's getting the rehab bullpen sessions in, and the hope is that, I think, in the next couple of weeks, they're going to make a decision about whether, like, maybe what the timeline will be to bring him back up to the majors. Because I think, from what I've heard, the goal is still for him to be a starter eventually. I think the organization and he himself, I think, still is viewed as a starter. So that'll be interesting to see where he fits in, because I think all 5 starters right now are playing pretty well. Even Yusei Kikuchi is playing pretty well. Ryu, for being the 5th starter on this team at his age and with the injury history, actually, I thought going 5 innings, not a lot of swing and misses yesterday. He allowed some hard contact yesterday, but at the same time, I wonder what Pearson's role is vis-a-vis the starting rotation. But if he comes in and is a bulk reliever right away, hey, I mean, that'll look pretty good for a guy who can throw 100. It's just, hey, I've never had mono, but it doesn't sound pleasant. I'll say that. So I understand why they're being cautious with him. But as I understand, we will see Pearson definitely before the All-Star break, and maybe before even mid-June at this rate.
Yeah, I mean, I wish him well, because he's had the worst luck in terms of injuries, and the expectation that was on his shoulders when he first got called up, very similar, of course, to Alek Manoah, and their storylines have been very, very, very different. Just thinking about pitching, and I'd love to get your take on what happened with Alek last week when he came through 8 innings and had a moment with Charlie in the dugout. Right decision, wrong decision? How much does a complete game these days mean? Because the stats are way down from where they used to be historically. The way baseball's managed is clearly very, very different. Where does that sit for a player who wants to go for perhaps a personal record versus the bigger picture for the team and getting a win in the win column.
So I guess when he came out of the game, he was at 83 pitches, I believe, right? And so I totally get it. I 1000% understand Manoah being fired up, because from what we understand of Manoah in his relatively young career, that's the kind of guy he is, right? He is a competitor. He is fiery. He, definitely leads by example, but I think he also, he wears his emotions on his sleeve, which I think which endears him, I think, to a lot of people, fans, and the media. So I totally get that. I have no issue personally with him going to Charlie Montoyo or to Pete Walker, or kind of stomping around the dugout a little bit, because I mean, if Max Scherzer did that, or if I don't know, Garrett Cole did that or something like that, Justin Verlander, I don't think too many people would have an issue with it, because those guys are kind of known for being insane competitors. I get the feeling people kind of were like, he needs to be a little more respectful just because he's a young guy and there are some vets in that clubhouse. And we did see Lourdes go over there and talk to him, put his hand around his shoulder, trying to calm him down. Springer talking to him a little bit, trying to calm him down as well. So I personally, though, I have no problem with that. But how I do understand wanting to get him back out there for the complete game, because how long has it been since we've seen a complete game? Was it Stroman like a couple of maybe 5 or 6 years ago, it feels like? And that feels like it's another world essentially in terms of how you were talking about it, how baseball is managed these days and bullpens are deployed. But Jordan Romano is just, I do think he is at worst maybe the second best closer in baseball, maybe behind Taylor Rogers, let's say, with San Diego. But dare I say, Romano is not the kind of guy you want coming in with a guy on first or a guy on second, and he's constantly having to look back behind him to check there. I think the fastball has decreased a little bit for Romano this year. So I think you'd rather, if you really need to eke out a win, and gosh, the Blue Jays needed a win to start the series against the Reds. I think you need to take all chance as much out of it as possible and give Romano a clean inning. And I think it was a salve a little bit that he came in and just shut down the Reds right away. And so they didn't open the door for, hey, maybe Manoah should have gone back out there. But I do get it, though. I would have, my like caveman baseball brain wants to see more complete games, and I want to see Manoah throw 110 pitches and so on. But I'm glad it worked out the way it did.
Yeah, because there was a situation, and I can't remember who it was against, for Gosman earlier in the season, where he went into the ninth inning.
The Red Sox, I think it was the Red Sox.
Was the Red Sox? Yeah. And if I recall rightly, somebody did get on base in that inning, and then of course Romano had to come into that situation that you're explaining. I just thought it was interesting, having gone through the Gosman's storyline. I wonder whether that shaped some of that discussion around the end of the eighth inning, in terms of, we don't want to see that happen again. Particularly, I suppose, now with Romano having not been very well over the last week or so, and not got quite his stuff as he had at the beginning of the season.
I think you're right. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I dare say, because when Gosman came, I think the game was at Fenway, because he came in for I guess it was the bottom of the ninth inning, and then a guy got on base, and it was the very first base runner of the bottom of the ninth, and he got yanked right away.
Straight away, right?
Yeah, and he was, I think he was already around 100 pitches, maybe even over 100 pitches at that time. So I don't think anyone really had any issue with him getting yanked. But I think you're right. I think the issue of what happens if a base runner gets on base, they were only up 3-1 at the time. So do you really want to, screw around with that? And hey, I mean, I get the other half of it too, because Manoah, I think the fastball was still topping out at 96, 97 miles an hour. So it's not like he looked all that fatigued. So I get sending him back out. Maybe you give him one base runner, but again, I feel like you said, with the GI illness for Romano, do you really want to be inconveniencing him at all? I think probably not at this point in the season, where you really need to, because man, Steve, can you imagine what the conversation would have been had they dropped 2 out of 3 against the Cincinnati Reds? We would be having a completely different conversation about this team after that. And I mean, even after they lost the series finale and it was kind of cool. I freely admit, as a Toronto boy, to see Joey Votto get the game-winning home run as another Toronto boy, but at the end of the day, you want to see the Blue Jays sweep the Reds, right? That's what you want. So,
well, they can't.
The conversation, yeah.
They sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. They can't buy a sweep at the moment. It seems to be every series you think, oh, this is the one, and no, it's not the one. It's just I guess that's the nature of baseball. It's a long season, isn't it? And where you think something should be fairly straightforward, actually is it's never going to be as easy as it appears, perhaps on paper. So in terms of your own enthusiasm and excitement for, the rest of this season, how full or how empty is your glass right now? Where are you sitting for the Jays?
I think there's probably, unless something catastrophic happens, I think there is pretty much no way they're going to miss the playoffs. I would think, especially with expanded playoffs this year, right? I would have said that, I think, even if there weren't any expanded playoffs and the wild card numbers remained the same. But now that there's a third wild card, I almost feel like unless everyone gets injured at the same time and goes on the IL, and we watch the Bisons come up and play for the Jays at some point, I think there's pretty much no way they're going to miss the playoffs. How well they do in the playoffs, I think if the playoffs were to end today, I think we would see the Jays play the winner of the AL Central, I think is where it would stand, or at least that's where it stood a couple of days ago. And if that's the case, I like their chances. I do. I mean, the Jays are, if it means they have to play, I don't know, the White Sox or something in a 3-game series, I think I would take the Blue Jays. Maybe that's a homer take, but I think I would still. The beating the Yankees is always going to be tough, but they're even better than I thought they would be this season. Particularly the bullpen. A lot of those guys like Michael King and Clay Holmes, and a lot of them have been a lot better than Jonathan Loáisiga, still being as good as he was last year. A lot of them being better or as good or better than they were in 2021 makes for a difficult out, no matter when you play the Yankees. And now Aaron Judge, dare I say, is playing like the AL MVP, at least right now. Through 2 months of the season, he is up there, but we'll see if that doesn't tail off by the end of the season. But if the Jays finish a couple games back of the Yankees and they win their first wild card matchup, I think that's not a bad result. But at the same time, you had said this earlier, Steve, that the expectations for this team were sky high. And I think Fangraphs had the division winner as the Blue Jays prior to the season, over 100 wins and so on. So by that metric, I guess it is a bit of a disappointment. But at the same time, I still think this team, there's still so much baseball left to be played. I know people despise hearing it's early, but there's still so much more of the summer, and this team typically doesn't get hot even with these current iteration of the players. They typically don't get hot until around or after the All-Star break anyway. So I'm going to reserve my total judgment until we get past, see if there are any trades to be made as well, because I think Ross Atkins is probably not done improving this team as well.
Yeah. I was just going to touch on the Yankees. You still mentioned it there. Do you think we could catch them, or do you feel that even at this stage that they are probably, I know it's only, what is it, seven games behind or something like that? Which, if they get a good run and the Yankees have a bit of loss of form, it's very, very quick to switch that around. Do you feel the Jays have got that in them this year to come back?
I think they do. I think they're definitely, like, when we get to August and maybe September, and we're circling, because when we get to that point of the season, what we all like to do is you're circling the games in the calendar. Okay, well, if they win 3 of these 4 games, and if they win 2 of these 3 games, right, and if they can, and if the Yankees get beat by the Rays and also maybe get beat by the Dodgers a couple times, you know what I mean? You're kind of doing all of those, that kind of mental math for the rest of the season. But I think come the end of August, beginning of September, we will be viewing the Jays and Yankees as a real dogfight. I think the early season woes will probably have gone by. And also the Yankees getting to 32 wins or whatever it was last night. I don't know how sustainable that is for any team, right? I mean, they are a very good team. There's no doubt about it. But I mean, the Dodgers are not going to win at that pace. The Padres are not going to win at that pace. The Astros and other good teams around the Rays, they're not going to win at that pace for the entire season, right? So I think again, I mean, look, Giancarlo Stanton had to go on the IL. We've seen Aroldis Chapman take a step back this year. Judge is probably not going to hit, I mean, he has 17 home runs. He's probably not going to hit a home run every other day for the rest of the season, especially at his age. I think he's 30 this year. So I don't know. They're a very good team. I'm not trying to take away from them at all, but at the same time, I think August, September, things will probably regress for them. And can I say positively regress for the Blue Jays?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess the Red Sox also have been a little bit of a surprise in terms of their start, although they've had a good run recently and are starting to sort of claw their way back. And Baltimore themselves actually have probably been performing better than anybody anticipated. I think only was it yesterday, the day before, they're only sort of 3 or 4 games behind the Jays, but I think things will settle down. And hopefully the Jays will be in amongst the mix. It'd be great to get a divisional title again. I'd love to see that happen, but if that doesn't happen, as you say, wild card is definitely what we're looking for. So thank you so much for your time. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. It's great to get your insight. Can you just give us a little bit of where people can find you, just in case they're not aware of all your social bits and pieces? That would be really cool, just as we end up.
Sure. Yeah. My Twitter is at SNSALLI, which is where I post most of my stuff anyways. And yeah, you can also find me on sportsnet.ca, and that's where I post some of my articles as well. There might be, I think Ben was talking about, Ben Nicholson Smith was talking about maybe some fantasy baseball articles coming out a little later on this summer. So we'll see, because I do live in the world of fantasy sports. But yeah, Steve, thank you for having me on. I really appreciate it.
No, absolute joy to chat to you and to, as I say, to get your insight on all things Blue Jays. Really thankful for your time, and we wish you well, and look forward to hearing you on the airwaves and hearing all that you've got to say. So thanks for your time.
Absolutely, Steve. Anytime.
Cheers.
The Red, White, and Blue Jays podcast is a production of Blue Jays Fans UK. If you've got a Blue Jays story to share, let us know. Email us at bluejaysfansuk@gmail.com. And follow along on Twitter and Instagram at Blue Jays Fans UK. I'm your announcer, Jim Langton. Thanks for listening.